Blog Talk Radio.
The separation of powers works. Our Constitution works. Your duly elected representatives have been consistently informed on exactly what we're doing.
For this is unprecedented that the House of Representatives would be meeting in secret preliminary to legislation that it intends to pass. I haven't experienced this in my time.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was,
may I most respectfully request that matter not be touched upon at this stage.
There are no shortcuts to protecting America. But my assessment and my team's assessment was that they help us prevent terrorist attacks. You can't have 100% security and also then have 100% privacy and zero inconvenience.
I vow to the American people that our government would do everything within the law to protect them against another terrorist attack.
Did you know the Patriot Act was written before 9/11? Oh, yeah.
When I came into this office, I've made two commitments that are more important than any commitment I make. Number one, to keep the American people safe, and number two, to uphold the Constitution.
The privacy of ordinary Americans is fiercely protected in all our activities.
And that includes what I consider to be a constitutional right to privacy.
The intelligence activities I authorized are lawful and have been briefed to appropriate members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat.
When it comes to telephone calls, every member of Congress has been briefed on this program. With respect to all these programs, the relevant intelligence committees are fully briefed on these programs.
The government does not listen to domestic phone calls without court approval.
First of all, these are not accidental overreaches. I mean, the gathering of metadata, meaning the gathering of data about people as to whom the government lacks any evidence of suspicion whatsoever, is not an accidental overreach by the NSA. It's an intentional overreach by an inappropriate, unconstitutional statute. Now, the statute which lets federal judges on the secret FISA court sign these general warrants without any evidence of individualized suspicion as required by the Constitution actually creates, in my view, an unconstitutional court. Here's why. The Constitution says before the federal judiciary can do anything, there must be a dispute, a case or controversy. Judges don't exist in the abstract to say, that's constitutional, that's unconstitutional, and we have the power to decide which is which. The jurisdiction of a federal court can only be invoked when a plaintiff sues a defendant or when the government prosecutes a defendant. So absent that case or controversy, which is the absolute baseline for the invocation of the jurisdiction of a federal judge, the federal courts have no jurisdiction.
Nobody is listening to your telephone calls. If the intelligence community then actually wants to listen to a phone call, they've got to go back to a federal judge.
So far, we've been very successful in preventing another attack on our soil.
They make a difference to anticipate and prevent possible terrorist activity.
The founders and many great men after them have warned, do not give up your freedom for security. President Eisenhower warned that the potential for misplaced power exists and will persist. But there's terrorists under the bed. Not my bed. Have Americans become weak? Who is believing this crap, that there's terrorists everywhere? And now, it's you, the domestic terrorist. You're next on the list.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. You are that generation. This is your role. Freedom must be defended from the government that wants to take it away from us.
The Robert Rule Show starts in
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Robert Rule Show. I'm your host, Robert Rule. Today is Sunday, May 18th, 2014. We have a lot to get to. I know there are people waiting on the line. I ask you to just hold on a little longer. We will get you on. This is your show, ladies and gentlemen. This is your chance to voice your opinion, to get the word out. If you're running for office, get the word out. If you oppose anything that we say, I'm not gonna hold you back. I mean, if you're wrong, I'm gonna tell you. But you're free to voice your opinion and let others make that decision. Let's get on with the headlines this evening. There are very few headlines this evening, but there are a lot of things that went on throughout the course of the week that I want to get to. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here are your headlines this evening. Russia and China are near an energy deal. I've been telling my friends this for quite some time, and it has come to pass. It will come to pass. China and Russia have one thing in common, and that's the bankers that run this country, that want to run the world, are trying to take them down, and they've got to stick together, and that's what they're doing. I don't blame them. Are they going to label me a domestic terrorist for saying, hey, I don't blame these two guys for teaming up because this other guy wants to kick their asses? I mean, am I going to be labeled that because of what I have said? It's the truth. Governor Christie making headlines again. I don't know why. Quote, we must lead the world. Courting powerful Jewish donors for the second time in 2 months. New Jersey, and that's the way to do it, guys. You court the Jewish donors. They're the ones with the money. Everybody says, oh, that's a stereotype. It's not a stereotype, ladies and gentlemen. It's the God's honest truth. Okay? They hold the money. They run the show. They give the politicians money. That's all the politicians here are always after the Jewish donors, and that's nothing against Jewish people. It's just a fact. Governor Christie called Sunday for a more aggressive foreign policy that defends American values abroad, even in some very messy, difficult places, quote unquote. The rest of the world watches in desperation and hope that America will realize and act upon once again its indispensable place in the world, Christie said. Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed, Governor Christie, but we aren't exactly the virtuous people we once were. The bankers now control everything, and that's who's running the show. It isn't the American people. We're going to get into that a little bit later. You know, we are not represented anymore because we've become complacent. We are uninformed. We are stupefied. We're idiots. We vote for these people who just then in turn spend all the money, make stupid laws, and make deals in their own interests, and then go after other countries, and then we wonder why people get pissed. And we're going to get more in depth in that, but I want to continue with the headlines. All right. Ex-NSA chief says the odds of terror attack are growing, and I just told you why. A lot more coming our way, they say. And listen, this is going to make sense later on in the show because we're going to talk about that. Gas prices rise, raises concerns. Godzilla rampage at the box office. I don't understand. I don't understand how people can go to a movie theater and watch a guy dressed up in a dinosaur suit stomp around a city. I understand it's the modern version, but little changes. You're never going to see some giant creature jump out of the sea, so to me it's pretty much pointless to pay a $12 plus the $5 for a small pop to go and see that movie. San Francisco traffic sign hacked to warn drivers. Anti-global warming alarmist blockbuster. Beatty puts reputation on the line for his last film. Holder says racial equality threatened in subtle ways. Yeah, it sure is. Anybody ever hear of what is it called when you have to hire a certain amount of people of a certain race? Yeah, equality is threatened. Because people with the exact same skills, or maybe a little more skilled, are not given a job. And the person who is a certain race gets the job. Listen, my son was in the hospital last week. He had to have surgery. And a lot of his friends came up to see him. And I'm just quietly listening to their conversation. And the one kid would say, well, how come I can't do this? And another kid would say, well, because you're white. Ladies and gentlemen, it's hitting our youth, this inequality. Something to think about. Again, I want to get back to the headlines, but this is a problem. New Hampshire town urges police commissioners to quit over Obama racial slur. This has become a political tool, ladies and gentlemen. That's the bottom line. President grapples with dissent from his own party. Crisis in space. U.S. takes on Russians over the International Space Station. Beijing evacuates its citizens from Vietnam after days of anti-China rioting. Kerry tells a group of graduates to keep faith in government. He's right. I'm doing the sign of the cross right now, but he's right. Okay? You have to have faith in your government because it's not your government that is creating these problems. It's the people you put there that are creating the problems. The Supreme Court just said, not even a month ago, that it's okay to lie. It's okay for politicians to lie during campaigns, and they cited it as their freedom of religion, which I don't understand. So they're allowed to lie, ladies and gentlemen. Whether or not you believe the lie is going to make the difference. Police are now armed for war against returning veterans. And this is an interesting article. Cops in armored vehicle asked by residents, "Are you coming to take our guns away?" In an interview with Fox 59, a Morgan County, Indiana police sergeant admits that the increasing militarization of domestic police departments is partly to deal with returning veterans who are now seen as the homegrown terror threat, which is what I talked about in the intro. In a chilling story entitled Armed for War, Pentagon Surplus gives local police an edge. We learn how a mine-resistant vehicle, or an MRAP, which was once used during the occupation of Afghanistan, will now be patrolling the streets of central Indiana, according to the report. Excuse me. Sergeant Dan Downing of the Morgan County Sheriff's Department states, quote, "When I first started, we really didn't have the violence that we see today. Adding, the weaponry is totally different now that it was in the beginning of my career. Plus, you have a lot of people who are coming out of the military that have the ability and the knowledge to build IEDs and to defeat law enforcement techniques." You mean like when you don't knock on a warrant signed by an incompetent judge to go in the wrong house and one of the deputies gets shot? You mean that kind of circumstance? All right, let me try to get through these headlines, ladies and gentlemen. And we're waiting. Of course, we're probably being hacked again, but we go through that every Sunday. Every Sunday somebody wants to hack us. Well, I can always go somewhere else to get my headlines. Dick Cheney declares Hillary Clinton responsible for Benghazi attack. Hillary and Ben Bernanke on the economy. The meat crisis is here. Is the West directly responsible for the massacres in Ukraine? And you know what? We talked about that on this show. There is evidence that there are American mercenaries over there in the Ukraine, paid for by our own government. Now, we don't want to think this. Nobody wants to have that thought. But I will tell you that truth is stranger than fiction in most cases. And as I promised, every Sunday we're going to have a few headlines from the conspiracy theory crowd, just to show you that there is a difference between real headlines and what people call conspiracy theory headlines. And now, I told you last week, you need to be able to discern. You need to be able to tell the difference between real and false. And sometimes you can't always prove whether it's real or not. It depends on who you look to for your source of media and research. A lot of people say, well, I didn't see that on ABC, NBC, or Fox. ABC, NBC, and Fox are part of the problem about 85% of the time. They're not going to report at all things that are really happening. All right? I don't know how any more plain I can say it. I don't know how to convince you. Maybe I don't want to convince you. I'm not here to convince you to believe my way of thinking. I've been doing this for 20 years. Okay, I've seen a lot. Maybe you're just beginning. Maybe you've been watching those channels for 20 years. And if that's the case, then we view things differently. And I would just urge you to do your research and go a little more in depth into these stories. So here it is. Visions of America on fire. One day it will burn. That's a headline. Are the Nephilim about to make their grand appearance? Astronomers stunned by mystery radio signals from space. And again, if you do your research and you look at another article it says that transmission, that frequency that they picked up was only like a millisecond. And they happen sporadically. And they're only like a millisecond each. And the last one was like in 2007. So you have to go in depth and do your research, ladies and gentlemen. That's just one example. Imminent attack on the United States from within, retired Army Ranger tells 1,000 Russians coming in each week to kill Americans. Could that happen? Yeah, because foreign troops, NLEO9, I believe it is a kind of like a treaty or a pact with NATO to bring troops here to train them. So, could they be here? Yes, they could be. Are they training to kill Americans? I don't know. Do your research. If you're coming to me for all the answers, I don't have all the answers. I'll be the first one to tell you. So I'm just reporting what I know. All right, let's get on with the show here. Let's see who we got on the line here. Caller, you're on the air.
Good evening. This is David Macko. Sorry I haven't been on the show for several weeks, but I was looking forward to doing it tonight. I can give you a little update on the Libertarian Party activities in Ohio.
Well, first of all, Dave, you're in a this is good. You're in a race now, a 3-man race, because Dave Joyce won the primary, and he only won by how many? A couple thousand votes.
It was, I don't recall the vote number, but the percentage was 55 to 45%, and Matt Lynch did very well considering Joyce and the neocon enemies of liberty lied about him, and also spent 10 times as much as he did.
Right. So now you are in the race, and you're running against what might as well be 2 Democrats.
We are. And I hope that every supporter of Matt Lynch will remember that basically I'm in agreement with him about 80% of the issues. If they want to send David Joyce a message, I'm the way to do it.
There you go. And you did agree with a lot of what Matt Lynch said because you were on the show. And he also agreed with you on that very same show.
Correct. Also, there are areas of agreement I have with the left, getting rid of the drug war, for example, having honest elections. Kasich and his John Kasich Re-Election Protection Act may have wiped the Libertarian Party and the other alternate parties off the ballot, so we have to start all over again next spring to get back on the ballot.
Now, what exactly happened there?
Okay. Charlie Earl, our candidate for governor, was kicked off the ballot. He appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. That appeal failed. He has now appealed again to the entire U.S. 6th District Circuit Court in southern Ohio. If that fails, there will be no Libertarian candidate for governor, which means the Libertarian Party will have to start fresh to get on the ballot early next year. So you'll see good people out on the streets, including myself, asking for signatures. The two write-in candidates, Kevin Nedler for Secretary of State and Bob Bridges for Auditor of State, are supposed to have received enough write-in votes to be on the ballot in November. We'll know for sure by tomorrow when the Secretary of State's office issues its official report. But, there's always a chance that they'll have some hanky-panky or downright crookedness.
And that's what we need to get rid of. I mean, I don't understand the thinking of Republicans sometimes, even though I am one. Why would you try to keep somebody off the ballot? It can only backfire on you.
Well, they're cowards and enemies of liberty. Again, my offer is open. If you finally come to the point where you can no longer stomach being in the Republican Party, as I did 50 years ago this year after Goldwater was on the back, you and all other Republicans who've had enough are welcome in the Libertarian Party, and we look forward to that day.
Well, I appreciate the offer, but I can never do that. We're making big changes in the Republican Party, Dave, as you know, and Kim Laurie was just elected county commissioner.
Yes. There are good signs.
Not elected county commissioner, but she was elected in the primary to run against the incumbent Dan Troy.
Yes.
So we're making progress. We're making big waves, and
you are, yes.
And I think
Go ahead. Geauga County, Skip Claypool also won. He's one of the better ones.
Yeah.
And I understand that Linda O'Brien got over 30% of the vote as write-ins after the neocon picked Latorette's daughter on Matt Lynch in his state representative district. So.
Right. Well, I'm not ready, and I say, okay, I know what's going to happen. Being Latorette's daughter, she's probably going to follow Latorette's lead. But I like to give everyone a chance their first time. And so we're going to be watching her closely, Dave, and I'm going to count on you for some updates also if you have any news.
Thank you. I accept your invitation. You have to watch everyone closely. I hope people watch me closely. I'd love to have them watch me closely at the City Club of Cleveland. If any listeners out there have any influence at all with the City Club, I want to return it to its original concept of the Citadel of Free Speech, which it was in 2008, and away from the concept of the dung heap of political correctness it became in 2012 when I was not allowed to participate.
Yeah, right. And if anyone wants to see that, go to YouTube, look up David Macko at City Club, and you'll get a good kick out of that.
I think I did very well.
That was at the time where a member of the audience called out Latorette, called him a liberal Republican.
Yes. That was the most humorous part of that hour, because Latorette responded, there are no liberal Republicans, and even a lot of people from other than my table laughed at that. That was the best joke of the campaign.
And then Latorette said, "What's your name and where do you live?"
Yeah, so he was the NSA.
Oh, that was classic. Speaking of NSA and all that other good stuff, I have some news clips. I'm gonna get Mike on, but in light of all the troubles that the libertarians are having, Dave, and being that you are running against two Democrats, that's what I call it. I think you're the most conservative person on the ballot for Congress in the 14th District. So in honor of that, and in light of that, I would like you to stay on for the whole show, and we're going to go over some things, but I'm going to bring my co-host on right now. Sound good?
I'd be glad to. I'll answer any questions you have.
All right.
I'm always willing to do that anywhere within the reasonable area of my district.
Well, we're going to give you all the exposure you can handle.
Thank you much.
You're welcome.
See. Do your best.
Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, what you up to, buddy?
Same old.
Oh,
yeah, a lot of good news coming out. First of all, I want to get into. Let's see here. I had a couple clips I wanted to play, but I want to get into last week's news. There's a few articles I want to touch upon. There's a U.S. Marine, I believe, still trapped in the Mexican jail. Do we have any news on that?
Actually,
would you like my
Go ahead.
Would you like my suggestion?
Yeah, and then I'll give you mine.
Okay. There have been various incursions by Mexican troops onto U.S. territory. I'm sure you're aware of that. The average American is not, if he listens to ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN and Fox and only reads the Plain Dealer. Now, what we need to do with this next incursion of Mexican troops into the United States, which is actually an act of war, which I don't recommend declaring war on them, just capture a bunch of them, say 6 of them, and hold them until they return the American who's being unjustly held there.
That's an okay plan, but I think I have a better one. Since we want to make 11 million, and I'm sure it's a higher number than that, 11 million illegals. We want to make them citizens, okay? Why don't we just... And not you, I'm saying we... Well, the Republicans and the Democrats, they got a deal going on right now. Believe me, they're going to do it, okay? And there's nothing really we can do to stop it unless we had the votes in Congress, which we don't. We don't have enough conservatives in there. But here's my idea. Since we're going to do that, why don't we just go a step further? Why don't we go march right into Mexico, make it a 51st state, then we'll have our amnesty and as many oceanfront homes as you can think of. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I don't think I would like that because you're going to take, wherever you conquer, you're going to take the debt, you're going to take the problems, and already we're stretched thin as it is.
But we make the debt. We control the debt. We control the monetary.
Well, understand though. I mean, that's not what we're built about, taking people's lands. That's what got us in trouble in the first place.
Are you kidding me? What about the Bundy Ranch? We don't take people's land?
Well, we shouldn't. We shouldn't.
Right. We shouldn't, but we do. So while we're at it, we shouldn't make legal 11 million plus illegal aliens, but we're going to. So why not just go in there, take it over, and there'll be no more debate?
Well, I mean, it's, the whole thing about blow their phones up and tell them, you don't like it, you don't want it to happen. I mean, they work for you. I know Democrats and Republicans are both.
Mike, you keep fading out. You keep fading out, buddy.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, but what I will tell you on that also is when Obamacare was passed, that night, the Congressional Switchboard, I shared 10 different phone numbers to the Congressional Switchboard. That switchboard blew up. I mean, they stopped answering calls. So many people were outraged, but they passed it anyway. I mean, calling your congressman is not enough these days. You have to scare the bejesus out of them. You have to say, look, I'm running against you, and then you have to vote for that guy and get your congressman out of there. Or you can recall him. Whichever makes no difference. They've got to know that the American people are upset.
Right.
Dave, what do you think of my idea?
I agree with Mike. I'm against declaring war on Mexico. Also, we don't need more Mexicans as part of our electorate. They have even less understanding of liberty and constitutionally guaranteed God-given rights than the average American. And, of course, that's another path to citizenship. We don't need a path to citizenship. We need a path back to Mexico for them, not our armed forces. Now, I disagree with this one, but I disagree with you on this one, Bob. I'm with Mike.
I didn't expect either one of you to agree.
Good.
I'm just putting it out there. I mean, if we're, we're doing all this, why not? It's either
They're
that.
holding,
It's either that, or you cut off Social Security, medical, all that stuff. You cut it off. You don't let them have it unless they can produce identification of birth certificate. You do that, you're going to have less people coming over here. You don't need to build a fence because sometimes fences are built to keep people in. And if you're not going to do that, if you're going to say, well, we want amnesty, well, then just take over the country. I don't think anybody else around the globe is in a position to object.
We should phase out Social Security and the other welfare programs. Obviously, we stop them immediately for people who have no right to be here and who didn't pay into them. Eventually, we need to phase them out for everybody for us to be a free country again. As for the wall or fence, you have some valid points there, but if all Americans were fully armed again, if the gun laws were all repealed, there'd be less stopping Americans from leaving if we want.
Mike?
Although that is a problem.
Well, I just think that what should happen is that, basically they need to file a grievance with the international community to get this soldier back. Now, just to make a note, to be fair, the soldier did go in with a weapon. Okay, it doesn't make it any less right what they did, or it doesn't give them a right to come into our land with federales or federal troops. I mean, neither American should go to Mexico armed, or Mexican come into the United States armed. So
let me ask you a question, Mike. Would you go into Mexico unarmed?
I personally wouldn't, but what I would do is I'd be a little more tactical about it. I would contact somebody, I have a few Hispanic friends, so what I would do is I would talk to them and see if they can, arrange, something for me. You know what I mean?
Well, according to the mother, young man didn't even know he was there. He had gotten liquored up and didn't really know where he was. And if that's the case, the mother sounds very sincere. If that were the case and I were president, I'd send in a combat unit to go get his ass and take out anybody that got in the way.
Well, Rob, here's the problem with that. Number one, you shouldn't be carrying a loaded gun when you're liquored up.
Why?
Well, because
I know.
So some people get pissed.
Yeah, not everybody can handle their liquor. I know.
Well, it's like the man-woman thing. The more you drink, the more beautiful everybody becomes.
Right. The better she looks.
Right. Well, I'm being fair to both sides, but no, I'm not speaking of bisexuality either. So the thing about it is, hey, I tell you how it is, man. The thing about it is you can't think clearly when you're liquored up. It's a proven fact. I mean, I'm for drinking. If you're an adult, you want to go have a drink or get liquored up, that's your choice. But don't keep a gun on it because if somebody confronts you, you might just do something you'll regret.
Well, see, I'm from the country.
Right.
I've had a gun on me many times when I've been drunk, and I've never shot anybody. I've never even threatened to shoot anybody because even when I'm liquored up, I know right from wrong, and some people just don't. They can't handle their liquor.
But see, Rob, that's you, bro. That's you and me, But I mean, heck, a lot of people can't handle drink sober. Because they're afraid of them, or they haven't seen one in their life, or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
You're fading out again.
I said some people haven't even seen a gun their whole life while they were sober. So I don't even think sober they would know how to handle one.
All right. So let's get into some stories here. I've got a lot of people say, well, Robert, why do you play Alex Jones all the time? Because he's right 98% of the time. The other 2% of the time, He's just exaggerating to get it to sink in. Okay, because a lot of people say, oh, well, that's not a big deal, when it really is. And so sometimes he'll exaggerate. But he's usually right, and it's maybe 10 years out, okay? 10 years ahead of the time. And then after 10 years, people forget, because let's face it, every 4 years, people forget what politicians have done. And they wait 5 years or 4 years, and then they run again. And everybody forgets it. So, let me play this little clip. You're going to like this. And this is happening, and it was predicted. Here it is, and then we're going to talk about it.
We're going to get into something I told you about. I don't know. We had Derry Brownfield on the show many times. He died, what was it, last year? Was it 2 years ago now? Time really moves fast, but he was a long-time big cattleman up in Missouri and had a big syndicated radio show, one of the first in the country. Even back before they really had talk radio, he did the Farm and Ranch Report and would talk about what was happening. And he pointed out that you have record beef prices in the last decade, but record bankruptcy for cattle ranchers. And almost everyone I know is getting out of cattle ranching because they've changed the tax rules, gotten rid of write-offs, where you cannot make a living doing it. Everyone I pretty much know who's a small-time rancher with 20 head, 100 head, 200 head, more of a hobby rancher, they do it because you get a little tax write-off on your property. Because if you don't have cattle on your property, you can't pay the property tax. Let's say you put beehives on it, and then you sell it to a local honey gatherer. Let's say you got 100 boxes on your property. You might get $3,000 or $4,000 in a year, if you're lucky. But you got to give medicine to the bees. You got to check them. You got to. I mean, it's a lot of work, and you get $3,000 or $4,000. And then let's say you got 100 head of cattle. You got to keep the fences up. They get out sometimes. You got to give them the vaccinations, veterinary bills, all of it. All that does is let you keep your 500 acres it takes to have 100 cows, depending on the type of grassland. Then you still got to feed them during the winter. And then maybe you sell, 10, 15, 20 cows a year. And let's say you sell them for $1,000 a piece or whatever. They then get sold off, and there's no more what you'd call real cattle auctions. There's no real cattle market. So the big distributors get them. They send them to meatpacking plants. They've shut down all the little meatpacking plants. They jack up the prices super high on the consumer. So you're paying $30 for a ribeye at a decent steakhouse, $40, $50 at a fancy one. You go to the discount places, $20 for a thinner ribeye. That ribeye at that steakhouse just 10 years ago was $10. It's now $20. The fancy steakhouse, I remember at a steakhouse just 10 years ago thinking a $25 steak was too much. Nothing's $25 at a nice steakhouse now. You go to some steakhouses, it's $75 for a prime cut. Sorry, my mouth's trying to water here, excuse me. I remember 10 years ago I could take the family and get a Chateaubriand, which is basically like a big long cut of filet mignon, 5 or 6 cuts. It'd be $75, $50. Now it's $150. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain the New World Order. It's a perfect illustration. The cattle ranchers go bankrupt because the economy is rigged and actuaried where you can't make it. My dad got word 5 years ago, we're getting rid of hobby farming and ranching write-off. We don't care if it's still on the books as a law. You can't do that. The IRS sent him letters, and he went to his accountant, or we're going to retroactively charge you all this money with penalty and interest. And my dad looked at the books and said, but if I stop cattle ranching, then we can't pay the property taxes. So he continues to cattle ranch, I guess about 100 head, with my uncle. Even though it loses money coming and going, he loses less money than he would if he quit. I'm going to explain that again. My father doesn't want to sell the land that we have left that goes back to Spanish land grants, Mexican land grants, 1829. The property is a liability. The government knows that and has set things to where most people won't keep it. My dad is a medical manager and a dentist who worked very hard, and he subsidizes keeping family property just because we don't own it. The government owns it with those taxes. The power to tax, the power to destroy. So here's the article on the Economic Collapse blog. It links through to all the mainstream news articles out of the USDA, the U.S. Drought Monitor, Scientific American, Associated Press, you name it. Totally bibliographed. The meat crisis is here. Price of shrimp up 61%. Beef at all-time high. Pork exploding to all-time high. Bloomberg reports as well. Stories up on Infowars.com. And the media will say it's a drought. That's only a small part of it. In California, that's what's hitting a lot of the vegetables. It's that people are getting out of it everywhere, and now they're shipping beef in, but you would think that would drive down prices. No, the packers all work together. There's only 5 or 6 big companies. Last time I checked, it's probably less now. And they all throttle it and control it to keep the prices as high as possible. So, the article goes on, and Bloomberg goes on to say it will now be a luxury to even have a pork chop. That's social.
And he was about to say, that's socialism. Mike, what do you think? All right, Dave. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I think I think he's right in a certain aspect. What you got to realize, too, though, is everything's gone up. Anything anymore is becoming, a luxury, as they say. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Dave.
We need to abolish the Federal Reserve System and have honest money. We need to abolish the Department of Agriculture. At the state and local levels, we need to abolish property taxes. Otherwise, we're going to continue to head into a dictatorship where the people are starving and much more easily controlled by the government.
Right.
So your only alternatives are to vote Libertarian, so you don't have to shoot the bastard.
I love that.
Same thing I've been saying for many years. Same thing Ron Paul has been saying.
But
same
Dave,
thing G. Edward Griffin. Yeah.
Didn't the Department of Agriculture just acquire weapons?
Yes.
What do they need those for?
To suppress the American people and enslave us. Oh,
Mike.
You mean the official argument? No, they haven't even given an official excuse. I haven't even heard an official excuse. That's how arrogant they are. That's
they just do it.
Brazen they're just huge amounts. 2 billion rounds of ammunition. Well, you know that. You listened to Alex Jones and other honest sources of information.
Well, that was just the DHS. 2 billion rounds of ammunition, hollow points at that. And they said, well, we're going to use them for target practice. They don't use hollow points for target practice. And now the Department of Agriculture, and I don't have the statistics, Mike, maybe you do, has purchased weapons and ammunition.
No, actually, I don't. I read the story. I basically skimmed through it, and it was stating that they had purchased millions of dollars worth, and they're really not even what they are. They're like submachine guns. They're not rifles. Not that it makes it any less, worrisome, but
right.
Why would they need submachine guns? I can understand maybe if they were buying rifles, maybe the aliens are coming. Who knows, man? But come on, submachine guns.
They got to get those mad cows, right? All right. We're going to go to commercial break. Everybody can relieve themselves, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Obamacare. Fun. Cool. YOLO.
At Obamacare, we believe in saying the words affordable health care so that young people will love us and sign up like lemmings. Sure, you pay 2.5% of your income in penalties, but young people don't have to worry about that because you don't have a job. Work sucks. That's why we at Obamacare want to trade your full-time job for a part-time one, so you'll have more time for fun things, like watching millionaire celebrities tweet about how affordable we are. Obamacare. Just like guys enjoy premium leather seats, so too you'll enjoy paying triple the healthcare premiums out of your new part-time salary. Speaking of guys, ever been on a mandate before? At Obamacare, we're full of mandates. But don't worry, big corporations get exempt, so you don't have to. It's fun paying for things you don't even use. Yeah, you work out, stay healthy, but come on, brah. Someone's got to pay for people who smoke, drink 85-ounce sodas, and live in a Barca lounger. So enjoy your premium hikes, young people of America, because everyone loves hikes. Obamacare. If millionaire celebrities can afford us, why can't you? A message from the White House Office of Obamacare. Propaganda to get young people to love us and sign up like lemmings.
And on the 9th day, God spilled some coffee on an angry possum, and God made a liberal. God said, I need someone willing to get up at the crack of noon and check their Facebook and tweet vile things, take a nap, borrow money from their parents, and stay out all night drinking Pabst ironically and snorting bath salts and wine until midnight. So God made a liberal. He said, I need a person that can take a thriving community and turn it into a debt-ridden post-apocalyptic welfare state. I need someone who thinks meat is murder, produce is raised in grocery aisles, who can't fix a flat tire or change her own oil, and who, when forced to finally get a job as a barista, makes you wait for your latte while they play Angry Birds on their iPhone and then takes his union-mandated 2-hour break. So God made a liberal. God said, I need somebody dumb enough to believe in global warming and deficit spending, yet arrogant enough to look down at hard-working folk because they don't have a worthless Ph.D. in 17th century Belgian lesbian studies. It had to be someone that would tax and spend, sue and attack, flip and flop, legislate from the bench and pass an unread bill, a person that would take a story of American success and turn it into a lesson of injustice. So God made a liberal. It had to be someone who'd lie to themselves and others and envy the successful, someone to whine, cry, demand, screech, and scream sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigot. It had to be someone that at the end of the day they could go home after helping rip apart a country with divisive race and class war, and who would laugh and then sigh with mocking eyes, thinking, if I hadn't aborted all my children, they'd probably say they want to spend their life doing what Dad does. So God made a liberal.
And do you think that you can act without Congress and initiate a no-fly zone in Syria without congressional approval?
You know, again, our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you and determine how best to approach this, whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress. I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here.
Well, I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and then we'll come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
No, well,
I want to just say to you, that's a big dish. Wouldn't you agree? You've served in the Congress.
Yeah.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Broadcasting live from FEMA Region 5. You're listening to The Robert Rule Show. All right. We have a couple of stories this past week on veterans. And the first story I want to get to is this one from DML. In Shreveport, Louisiana, veterans are being pushed out of the nursing home they depend on. Why? Unfortunately, it's a consequence of President Obama's overreaching pen. In February of this year, the president signed an executive order to raise the minimum wage for new federal contract workers, bumping the $7.25 an hour wage to $10.10. Turns out nursing homes that have contract for subsidized care from VA become federal contractors. And according to Mrs. Franks, the public affairs officer at Shreveport's Overton Brooks VA Medical Center, if a VA center cannot afford to raise the wages it pays its employees, their contract with the government will not be renewed. Thus, the veteran pays the price by losing their care and shelter he or she deserves. As you'd imagine, the information comes as a shock to many of our military heroes who simply cannot survive without proper care. Mike.
Well, you know what? I'll be quite honest with you. Most people don't care about the veterans. They might say they do because it's politically correct and the right thing to do. You know what I mean? But most people don't give a darn. I mean, heck, not to say any names or subjects, look what happened here in our county. I was called crazy. Iraq made me crazy, and, I went off the deep end because of my service. So, it's like, okay, if somebody's, if it was even true, won't you, just keep your mouth shut about it and let the VA deal with someone, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, I'm not shocked at all. I mean, it's bound to happen. They say, well, we learned from Vietnam vets. Well, that's fine. They might have, people might not have spit on us or thrown, their defecation at us when we came home. But I'll tell you, after the years go by, they lose interest and, they really don't care. Not that I'm asking for anything, you know what I mean? So,
right.
Most vets don't want help. It's some that require it, though. I think those are the ones getting the brood into this.
Dave.
Well, there are several important pieces of information that have come out of this atrocity. First of all, it's another reason to impeach Obama. He's making war on the American people. Second, it shows the hatred of the enemy who controls our government, laughingly put, their hatred for veterans. It shows their fear of veterans. All of the previous communist and fascist governments tried to neutralize veterans because they knew that veterans had the ability to resist and revolt and overthrow them and restore liberty if political and educational means fail. Also, the VA situation is a prelude, a prophecy of what will happen if Obamacare is not repealed. Everyone is going to be subject to death panels. Those lying so-and-sos like Pelosi said there are no death panels. Why did 40 or 50 or God knows how many veterans die? Because they didn't have treatment due to some death panel. I also believe that if I'm elected, I think I'd want to put the Veterans Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs back under the Defense Department, make all of their employees subject to military justice so that they can be dealt with more quickly, executed more quickly for their crimes of murder and treason.
Well, there's a new story out, and here's the headline. Veterans Advocate says it's time for swift accountability in the VA scandal. The deputy director of the VFW Nation's Veterans Service said Sunday there needs to be a swift accountability regarding reports of treatment delays at veterans hospitals across the country. The families of these veterans need justice, and they need it quickly. I couldn't agree more. Gallucci's comments come on the heels of a VA whistleblower, Dr. Sam Foote, a retired doctor who recently shed light on the backlogs and long delays for vets seeking medical treatment. Most recently, accusations of secret waiting lists and document destruction at a Phoenix VA facility have triggered widespread anger across the country. I'm outraged. I've heard of this before on the Josh Tully show, and I believe we have a clip here, and this is from like a year ago. And I want to play this clip for you because we played it before on this show, and we heard nothing. Crickets, you know. I want to play this again. Let's see if we have it here. Here it is.
Okay, so it is about 5 minutes to 2, May 1st, 2013. I'm standing outside the William Morris, hold on one second, it's the William S. Middleton Veterans Memorial Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm here because I received a terrible report about heinous treatment that is going on here. And I wanted to see for myself, and I did see for myself. Now, unfortunately, they wouldn't let me film inside, so I'm doing it outside, right outside the emergency room door. This is what we have going on. We have an early 60-year-old gentleman with a broken jaw. Came in a month and a half ago. They haven't repaired his jaw yet. Matter of fact, the ear, nose, and throat surgeons haven't even spoken to him yet. Now he's back because there's an infection, of course, surprise, surprise, and we wouldn't treat a dog this way. We wouldn't treat a pet this way. I mean, think of the little devices we put on dogs to make sure they can still walk around with no feet. This is a veteran, and a month and a half goes by with a broken jaw, and they don't bother to fix it, but that's not the only one. That's not the only one. I also know of a gentleman in his 80s who has an aneurysm in his back, and they won't fix it. Now, a normal hospital would fix it. They won't fix it because it doesn't meet a certain size requirement of aneurysm, and it's 0.1 centimeter too small, 0.1 centimeter too small. And in reality, what they're really waiting for is they're waiting for it to get big enough so it bursts and he'll die. A normal hospital, already called and checked, normal hospitals are like, wait, why haven't they treated him yet? And that's just 2 that I've confirmed. I heard another one of a man who had an infection in his leg. They ignored it, didn't treat it. Now the infection has spread throughout his body, including his brain, and he's probably going to die too. This is the treatment that is going on here. At least that's what's being reported to me. So I want to hear your reports. If you have a family member or if you've been a patient here yourself, let me know. I want to put this on the air. This is heinous how we're treating our veterans. Whether you agree with war or not, these are the people who we should be footing the bill medically for, and we're just not. Now, I understand all VA hospitals are run differently. There might be some good ones out there, but even if it's not this one that you're having a problem with and it's one somewhere else in the country, call me, let me know. Call the show. 1-800-259-5791, 9 a.m. to 11, Josh Tully Show, joshtully.com. All right, so we spoke with the ER attending physician, and I have to tell you, he agrees. He thinks that the treatment should have been given, specifically regarding the man with the jaw. The man broke a jaw a month and a half ago, and he hasn't been treated yet. They sent him home. Now an infection has started. If you know anything about how the human body works, you know that could be deadly, and they still haven't treated him. The ER physician thinks it's as heinous as the rest of us do. He wants to remain anonymous, and he's saying that it's just the VA's policy that this is how they do this, but he's just as sickened and disheartened. It's absolutely crazy, and something has to be done about this. I want to hear your stories. Let them be heard from coast to coast. We will give you the platform.
Now, this is the Josh Tully Show, which can be heard on the GCN radio network, same as Alex Jones. This was like from a year ago, okay? And all this stuff is going on. It makes me sick to my stomach. But what's more, there's other things playing in here. First of all, you've got a bunch of bureaucrats that are in it for themselves, making money. They make stupid rules. Everybody follows to the letter. You're bringing in foreign doctors who don't give a damn about Americans. Dave, what's going on here?
Again, it appears to be a deliberate effort to kill or maim veterans. There's also another factor, I think. I'm not a psychologist, but if you have total corruption at the very top of any organization, namely Obama in the White House, you're going to have a contempt and similar disgust at the lower levels, such as the Veterans Administration hospitals and the Department of Veterans Affairs. So we're in a totally corrupt government, and the only way to solve this is to impeach Obama, impeach other criminals in this government, throw them out of office, and awaken the American people, as you're doing, as Alex Jones is doing, as I'm trying to do. We need to wake them up till they're totally outraged.
Not only that, Dave, but this is the VA hospitals is pretty much government care, and now everybody is going to get government care.
Exactly.
So think about it. You're sitting there on your couch right now. You're sitting in your chair. You've got medical insurance, but guess what? They have to answer to the same people the VA administration answers to. How do you think your health care is going to be? Mike?
Well, I can tell you this right now. In New York, I think, 113 veterans got hepatitis and HIV from unsanitary equipment. So maybe Mr. Macko does have a certain point that maybe they're trying to kill us. But let me tell my veterans something. I don't like to go to the doctor unless I'm very, very ill. And even then, what I'll do is veterans have an option. They can go. I don't know exactly what percentage they'll be covered. See, I'm 100%. So I'm covered if it's an emergency and I can go to Lake West or even, TRICARE, the VA will cover it. If it's like an infection, I'll go there to TRICARE, at Lake West, even the clinic. I won't go to Wade Park. I will not go to Wade Park. I don't trust them. It's sad, but you don't have to tell them you're a vet. Just go in there and say, hey, I can't afford it. And by federal law, they have to stabilize you or, give you a shot, an antibiotic shot. That'll clear the infection up. And then the doctor will give you a prescription. Go buy generics for $5 at Giant Eagle. So there's ways around it, Rob.
That's pretty good advice. That's real good advice, Mike.
That's what I do. I don't use the system. If the VA don't cover it, I pay my bill. Because I believe in man of good character. If you have the money and you can pay it. For hospital. If you don't have the money, make arrangements to pay it and go find another job somewhere.
You know what? I do that too. I actually pay my own doctor bills, and it's a lot cheaper when you go in there and offer to pay with cash.
Right. Yep. You can do it that way too, or make friends with some doctors, and say, hey, you know what? I'll come, whatever your profession is. Say, hey, I can barter services, and when your daughter or wife or you get sick, you just call them and say, hey, doctor, can you call in a script for me? Doctor will do a phone consultation with you. What's going on? Okay, do you have any allergies? No, I don't. Okay, I'll call it in for you. Simple as that.
Right. Dave, anything else to add to that?
Well, just that we have to get the government totally out of health insurance and health care. The mistake started during Roosevelt's war when there were wage and price controls, and so that health insurance was tied to employment, which was a horrible thing because when you really need insurance is when you're not employed. So that every time the government meddles in anything, it makes it worse.
Right.
This is true throughout history. Go back to the time of the pharaohs. Go to the time of the U.S. government. Whenever the government gets involved in anything, it gets worse. We need to shrink the government back to its constitutional limits, and then we can start shrinking it even more, especially the Fed government, state governments, and city governments. The government's not the answer. Government's the problem.
There are white folks, and then there are ignorant motherfuckers like you.
Oh, geez, Rob, you're going to get it, man. You're going to get it.
Oh, they're coming for me. That
there
was
are white
the wrong
folks,
one.
and then there are ignorant motherfuckers like you.
I'm going to tell you, they're going to take that book and hit you upside the head, boy. Holy crap. Anyway.
You know what? That was the wrong one. I actually hit it twice, and I apologize.
Hey, own up to it like a man now.
It actually was an accident. But I want to get into another subject here. I'm going to play the clip because this is catching on all over the world. And I said we were going to get into this tonight. And I promised, and here it is. They say the terrorist attacks are going to increase. They are. And I'll tell you why. Because the world is waking up. The world knows. The world knows that the bankers have set up their shop, their headquarters, right here in the U.S. They are using the most powerful military in the world to set up their new world order. And I know like 20 people just said, oh, this Rule guy, he's a conspiracy theorist. It's the God's honest truth. This is what's happening. They're setting up a new world order. They have a plan. It's all written in black and white. You can go and research it. It's all there, public documents. And the world is waking up to it, and they know. But the thing about it is they're blaming you and they're blaming me, the American citizens. And in a way, they are right, because we're too dumb to elect the right people to represent us in the Congress and in the Senate. Congress hasn't acted to impeach Obama. He's overreaching like there's no tomorrow with executive orders. He's written more executive orders than all the previous presidents combined. And we let him do it through our representatives because we have a representative government. And there are guys out there who mean well, who want to represent people and defend their civil liberties, but at the same time they're saying, well, look, this Congress, it doesn't represent us anymore. But listen, Congress does represent you. You're the ones who vote them in. So obviously, when it comes down to it, shit rolls downhill. I apologize for my French. It rolls downhill. You are the ones who are electing these people to represent you. So then whatever they do falls on you. And people around the world are blaming you. And they're blaming me. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to vote for the wrong person. Dave, how about you?
I totally agree with you. And that's why I'm running for Congress again. This is the best opportunity, other than having a radio show, to speak to a whole lot more people than you do ordinarily. Everyone should run for office at least one time in his life if he's reasonably intelligent and reasonably sensible. It's the one time in your life you get to vote for the perfect candidate, someone who will never betray you, someone you can trust completely. The American people are waking up, I think. Not as fast as we'd want them to, but faster than the enemy thought they would. Ron Paul had a great deal to do with it. Alex Jones has a great deal to do with it. And the third person who has a great deal to do with it is Barack Hussein Obama. He's waking up millions of Americans.
Mike, I'm going to play for you. I'm going to come back to you, Mike, but I'm going to play this. The world is waking up, and here is proof. This is from a media outlet overseas, and I'm not exactly sure which one, but I want to play it for you. And I'm telling you, you listen to this and think to yourself. Well, they're saying the Americans are to blame. And I'm picking up an echo from somebody. Not anymore. It's good now. But they're saying the Americans are to blame. And when other people see this broadcast, okay, all of the content is true. This is actually happening. But it's done by the bankers who control the politicians. The people make the wrong decisions because They're stupid. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I can't sugarcoat it for you. People are stupid. Even our own local elected officials are stupid when it comes to hiring the right person for the job. I guess you could look at it that way. And so they're blaming you and me, Mike, and they're targeting shopping malls and anywhere else people congregate. So here it is. I know I'm running with this because I'm trying to find it. So let me see here. Oh my gosh, I can't even find it. All right, apparently I can't find it. Dave, why don't you give us an update? Tell us your website and all that other good stuff while I'm trying to find this.
My website is www.mackoforliberty.org. My mailing address, where you can send contributions, is Post Office Box 39233, Solon, Ohio 44139. They should be made out to Macko for Liberty. The FedGov requires me to ask for your employer and your occupation. Unfortunately, I don't have the time or money to fight this unconstitutional FedGov requirement, so my only alternative would be to give your money back.
You said it gets way too complicated for me.
Pardon?
You said it gets way too complicated for me.
Well, that's why the government does it, to hinder people and frustrate them. The Libertarian Party National Convention will be in Columbus the last weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of June. For information about that, go to lp.org and lpo.org, which is the Ohio site. It seems
Dave.
possible that the Libertarian Party will have to circulate petitions to get back on the ballot next spring, so start exercising, walking regularly, holding clipboards, that sort of thing, so you're ready to go out on the streets next spring.
Well, we know you very well, Dave. We know you'll do a great job. The only other person that I could think of personally that I would like to see elected would be the man who runs for Attorney General, because it wouldn't be a Democrat and it wouldn't be a Republican. It'd be somewhere in the middle, and they can make the right decisions from there.
Our Attorney General candidate is Steve Linneberry. His case is in the courts with Charlie Earl. I don't want to build up any false optimism. That's all I'll say now. Within a few weeks, we'll know that situation for sure. We'll know about our write-in candidates, Kevin Nedler for Secretary of State, and Bob Bridges, Auditor of State, when the state of Ohio gives the official returns tomorrow. We'll see if they're on or whether we may have to go to court about that. The one good thing about this attack on the Libertarian Party shows that the enemy fears us. We must be doing something right. Use so much underhanded, rotten, evil actions to take us off the ballot, and especially the Republicans.
And you know what? I would go as far to say that Republicans and Democrats are working against the Libertarian Party, but I would say that people listening out there, because Dave, you got to use reason with people. Wouldn't you like to see a Libertarian in an office such as the Attorney General or, Auditor of State, something like that? Then you know for sure that the Republicans or the Democrats don't have their hands in it. It's a neutral party.
Mm-hmm.
I would sleep a lot better at night knowing that was the case. So, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to commercial, but we'll be back, and I will play that clip.
Now, John McCain and Lindsey Graham encourage you to get behind immigration reform.
Comprehensive immigration reform is almost within our grasp. But a few conservative Republican holdouts are making this process uncomfortable. They just don't understand the Republican Party is in a demographic death swirly. We need Hispanics to replace the coming wave of conservatives who will no longer support our party after we give corporate America the cheap labor we promised in exchange for campaign donations. Border security, biometric identification, fences, fines, penalties are all words that are somewhere in this bill. So it passes the smell test as far as we're concerned. So conservatives, quit calling and bugging your representatives to vote against this bill. It's a good bill, and as a co-author of McCain-Feingold, you have my word on that.
This message paid for by Democrats for Republicans, USA.
Well, the first day we met, he came up to me and the first thing he said was, God hates facts.
I did. It was beautiful. For me, Westboro Mingle is this vehicle that God did use to put my wife and I together. And that, for me, is a very powerful, powerful thing.
Powerful, like a bomb. Like a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, like a bomb that just blows everything up.
Kills everyone. When I met Jay on Westboro Mingle, I was so relieved. I finally found someone who hates everything I hate.
Blacks, gays, Jews, Mexicans, Jamaicans, anything west of America.
Music, dancing,
Vacations,
dinosaurs,
space travel,
modern art,
books.
Aww. Okay, and I remember this one time we were ticketing a funeral. It was the kindergartners or was it the war?
It was the soldier.
He was a soldier, and my arms were tired. And he comes up to me and he takes the sign out of my hands and he goes right up to that enabler's children. And what did you say?
He said your father's burning in the eternal fires of hell.
Hi, my name's Mindy, and I met my husband Jay on WestboroMingle.com.
Join WestboroMingle.com, the first website made by God.
Hello, peasants. Citizens. We are here to protect you. Do not believe the conspiracy theorists who say you have rights. Do not believe the conspiracy theorists who say there is a constitution. You don't, and there isn't. In fact, you need not bother with responsibility at all. We will take care of you. We will protect you. If you happen to hear these crazy people babble about gun rights, the Constitution, corrupt politicians, or anything else that could possibly sentence us to a life in prison, please contact our offices immediately, and we will indefinitely detain them.
Your papers? I don't think I have them on me. In that case, we'll have to ask you to come along. Wait, it's possible that yes. Here they are.
These papers expired 3 weeks ago. You'll have to come along.
Halt! Halt!
You're listening to The Robert Rule Show.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
What this world needs is a few more rednecks. The people ain't afraid to take a stand. What this world needs is a little more respect for the Lord and the law and the working man.
All right, we're into the last half hour of the show. We are joined by my co-host Mike and Dave Macko, congressional candidate for the Libertarian Party. He will be challenged by, dare I say,
Michael Wager and David Joyce.
Oh, thank you. I didn't want to say it. So basically, he is contending against two Democrats. And actually, we have a caller online, and I want to go to them real quick and find out what's on their mind. So if you two could hang tight, we'll get this person on, see what they have to say, and go from there. Caller, you're on the air.
John Pletchnik, everyone.
What's happening, John?
Not too much. I just wanted to call and encourage you to keep discussing the local issues. I have to say, it's most interesting when we hear your perspective on that.
Awesome. I appreciate it. But, John, we can barely hear you, so...
Mike, can you hear me any better now? I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, it's a little better now. So I'm
a fiscal conservative, Rob. So I'm trying to get as much use out of the cell phone as I can before it dies.
That sounds good to me. All right, so local issues. Yes, we are definitely keeping up on those. Well, trying to. We need more people to participate because, of course, not everybody can make it to council meetings. I work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and it's even hard for me to do this show. So if we could get people there and update us on what's going on, that would be a huge help to this show.
I agree. Although I will say one troubling thing I've seen in Willoughby Hills, and I'm sure it's true of many localities, is that it gets harder and harder for people who can't physically go to the council meeting to actually see what's going on. Apparently now that there are new digital requirements for the local cable stations, anyone who doesn't have the right kind of box and the right cable package isn't going to be able to watch, in many cases, the local council meetings. And a discussion that we've had is whether or not there should be a posting of all the council meetings to our city website. Although our mayor, of course, has no interest in that. You might guess why. But
right.
I think it's becoming more and more important that we have alternative ways for people to at least see the council meetings. I agree. What I would love is for everyone to come and be involved and be part of the discussion. But at the very least, we need to make these meetings more accessible so people can at least watch them and see what's happening in their communities.
What I'd like to see most is that everybody who can attend these meetings, Lake County Commissioners meetings, City Council meetings, the congressional hearings, just take a camera, buy a nice piece of equipment, and put it on YouTube for everybody to see. And you can actually make money off of YouTube from Google ads and whatnot. And it would probably pay for your equipment in the long run.
It might, but bear in mind a video has to go pretty darn viral to make any money off of it. And it's a long time that you have to essentially leave your computer useless when you upload a video to YouTube. If you upload a 30-minute or an hour-long council meeting to YouTube, you're talking about a 24-hour upload. It's a long time that you're dedicating your computer, and not a lot of people are willing to do that. Certainly not every meeting all the time.
Well, that all depends on your upload speed. I'm an IT guy myself. I know Mike is. I would say find a better provider that gives you the most upload megabytes. Mike, can you chime in on that? Crickets. All right. Well, now that I have you,
Mike.
yeah. Well, since I have you all here, I'm going to go ahead and play this clip because we are pressed for time. But I'll let you chime in also, John.
Thank you, Rob.
This is how the world views us, ladies and gentlemen, and I've been talking about this, throughout the night. They think it's us, the American people. We have become complacent. We don't watch all of the hearings. We don't know everything that's going on. We're afraid to run for office. People think it's us. We're the ones voting for the wrong politicians, and we're getting the blame, and that's why we're the targets. And I want to play for you this clip.
Killing your own citizens, then blaming another nation to start wars called a false flag attack. The most infamous is Operation Himmler. Nazis murdered fellow Germans, then blamed Poland to start World War II. Nazis trained by NATO were the vile snipers during the Maidan protests who shot both sides, both the police and their own supporters. It helped spark the violence that brought the coup d'etat. Leaked images show Ukraine nationalists Una Unso being trained to use sniper rifles by NATO. These false flags, writes intelligence author F. William Engdahl, are just the latest atrocity in the documented NATO Operation Gladio. Decades of terror attacks that have killed hundreds throughout Europe have actually been funded and planned by the White House. Top-level officials in the government and the CIA have confirmed. In what Wikispooks calls the most shocking story ignored by the mainstream, Gladio is admitted by former CIA head Bill Colby to be a major operation. Operations like the massacre at Bologna rail station, which killed 85 people and injured hundreds more. EU Parliament passed a resolution condemning the terror, demanded NATO stop and carry out a full investigation. The US simply ignored it. Evidence shows this US campaign of terror continues today, notes the world's leading scholar on Gladio, Dr. Daniel Ganser. FBI whistleblower Sybil Edmonds, who ACLU calls the most gagged person in US history, revealed the CIA's actually expanded the program internationally under codename Gladio B. The same professional snipers as in Kiev, writes Global Research News, have been found shooting both sides in countries throughout the world that offer resistance to the US. Political analyst Eric Draitser joins us. Really great to talk to you. What's going on?
Who's behind the snipers? If they work in the service of Western intelligence, this is quite clear. Likely private contractors, private mercenaries who are paid to create this kind of chaos. Those who probably cut their teeth on the battlefields of Afghanistan and in Iraq, who now are essentially murderers for hire, who are sent anywhere where the United States or its allies deem necessary to create chaos. So you mentioned a couple of examples in Syria, in Ukraine, in Venezuela. We should also remember, of course, Thailand in 2010. We saw a very similar situation there. Egypt most recently as well. This is a standard tactic, create a casus belli for the United States to have a military presence for decades to come.
The world's main instigator of false flags, notes the editor of upcoming book Flashpoint in Ukraine, Dr. Stephen Lenman, is the United States. The US hasn't been threatened with a real attack in hundreds of years, writes the author of Questioning the War on Terror, Dr. Kevin Barrett. The only way to force war on its population is through terror-inducing false flags. 266 American sailors were killed on the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. Using the slogan, "Remember the Maine," the establishment blamed an enemy mine, then colonized Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Admiral Hyman Rickover later revealed it had nothing to do with the enemy. The explosion came from inside the ship. The entire US Joint Chiefs of Staff called for another, quote, "Remember the Maine incident" with Operation Northwoods. Declassified documents show Pentagon plans to blow up a U.S. ship, hijack passenger planes, down an airliner from the U.S. full of college students, wage a, quote, terror campaign in Miami, other cities, and Washington, D.C. The false flag attacks must be, quote, widely publicized in mainstream media to cause a, quote, helpful wave of national indignation. The plans signed off by Armed Forces Chief Lyman Nemnitzer were blocked at the last minute by a horrified President Kennedy. It was opposition to out-of-control militarism, writes James Douglas in JFK and the Unspeakable, that Douglas says got Kennedy killed by the intelligence services. It is one of the versions for his assassination. Northwood's mastermind Lemnitzer was put in charge of NATO, where he, quote, hoisted the black flag of terror in Europe under Operation Gladio, notes the book Gladio, NATO's dagger at the heart of Europe. Kennedy's removal left the path clear for successor Lyndon Baines Johnson to return false flags to center stage. Within less than a year, LBJ fabricated the attack that plunged the U.S. into the Vietnam disaster. The president made up a non-existent strike on U.S. ships in the Gulf of Tonkin and said, quote, our boys are floating in the water. The lie goaded Congress into authorizing war, killing more than 3 million Vietnamese and 58,000 U.S. servicemen. President Bush Jr. told British Prime Minister Blair that if he couldn't get UN approval to bomb Iraq, he'd paint a U.S. jet in UN colors and try to get it shot down over Iraq to justify invasions. In a bizarre parallel, Life News this week filmed Kiev now using these armored helicopters with UN insignia against civilians in eastern Ukraine. These are just the false flags that are on the record and officially documented. Some are reprinted in 63 documents the government doesn't want you to read, written by Viet.
All right. Now that's what the world is hearing. That's what they think of us. And because we make the wrong decisions on the people we elect to represent us, we're guilty. I got to tell you, we're guilty. We're not smart enough to read the bills. We're not smart enough to look at voting records. Even our own elected representatives. Now, everybody has their own reasons. Some people say, well, you know, this person contributed to my campaign, so I did them a solid. You know, I backed them, or I gave them an endorsement. Or, you know, this person is the only electable person. And how many times have you heard that? This is the only electable person. That is BS. All right? And Kim Laurie, who was elected in the primary to run for county commissioner, is going to prove everyone wrong. Now, these people saying, well, they can't be elected. Well, elections have consequences. They'll probably vote for the other guy just so they can try to prove their point. But my point is, and the facts are, anyone can run for public office. Anyone. I don't give a damn what your degree is. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care whether you finished 9th grade or not. If you have common sense, if you love your Constitution, if you really generally care about the people in the area that you live in, you are qualified to run for office. And I would debate anybody who says otherwise. People, we've got to start doing our research, we've got to do our homework, and we've got to elect the right person for the job. Mike, I'm going to let you go first. What say you?
Well, I can tell you right now, the core value of why we have so many international issues is we put people of bad character and a bunch of hypocrites in the office. Okay? Until we, the American people, find people with better character, as we've discussed, many times on this show, we're going to have resentment from the rest of the world.
All right, Dave.
We need to look at the issues from the perspective of the rest of the world. If I thought the American people controlled the American government, I would hate us too. Fortunately, the non-government controlled media, the internet and such, are helping the people of the rest of the world to understand. They have a chance to listen to Alex Jones too and see that there are Americans who understand our government has been captured by the enemy. But the most important thing regarding foreign affairs, get out of NATO. NATO was a subsidiary of the United Nations. We need to get the United Nations out of the United States and the United States out of the United Nations and reestablish our national sovereignty again. A good way to think of it is this. You should support the FedGov against the one world government. You should support state governments against the FedGov. You should support county and city governments against the state government, and you should support the individual above all of them.
That was pretty good, Dave.
Thank you.
John, what say you?
Well, Rob, when I ran for office, and you can see this on YouTube, I had a speech or two posted. I said time and time again, too many trustees, too many councilmen, too many congressmen don't even read what they're voting on. It's not just the individual voters, like you said, it's the elected officials too. They don't even read what they're voting on. And my promise wasn't so much, I'm going to give you this or do that, so much as I will read every bill, read every budget, and vote my conscience each and every time, making an informed vote. And that's a very, very simple promise, and it's frankly the bare minimum requirement of the job, but almost no one keeps it these days. Both as a voter, as you're choosing your candidates, and the candidates themselves when they're elected. Most people don't read what they're voting on, and that's a big reason for why the American people don't have as much control over their government as they should. It's because they don't take the time, sadly, get involved to understand what they're voting on, and so many people don't vote in the first place.
And John, I know you being a law professor, you follow this as well as I do. The Supreme Court, help me out here, the Supreme Court said, basically, that politicians are allowed to lie because it's their expression of their religion. Am I correct in saying that?
I'd say it's a little more complex than that. Politicians are allowed to express free speech like anyone else. And there was a case between the Susan B. Anthony list, which is a pro-life group, and I believe a Democratic congressperson, where the congressperson claimed that the Susan B. Anthony list had essentially lied largely because of their pro-life views, and the Supreme Court obviously smacked that down and said, whether you think it's a lie or not, if someone believes that a child is, born before conception and they want to run a campaign based on that and state that you don't agree, short of actually proving a direct lie where you can sue for libel or slander, you can't say, well, I'm pro-life and you're not, so you can't criticize me on that. That's the fundamentals of free speech. I think if you really break the case down, it comes down to politicians have free speech, and I should hope they do.
Or let's say this, John. You're right. I agree with you. Or you can't say that God's going to drop you in hell because you're having an abortion because you're the baby's daddy's a rapist.
And you know what? You're allowed to say a lot of things that you shouldn't say. That's free speech, because who are you or I to judge what's permissible speech? I mean, at the end of the day, Barack Obama might well say that this entire radio show is impermissible speech.
Right.
Well, they're working on that, believe me. We're going to get to the FCC here in a minute, but I want to pose a question.
Well, this is Dave Macko.
Hang on, Dave.
Sure.
I want to pose a question to you, John, because you're an elected representative, and to you, Dave, because you hope to be an elected representative. If a 2,000-plus page bill wound up on your desk and you had 24 hours to vote yay or nay, what would you vote? John, you first.
Well, I've had similar situations. Not necessarily a 2,000-page document, but I've certainly had ordinances thrust at me by Mayor Bob Weger or one of his council people last minute, sometimes the day before. In fact, I've had ordinances put in front of me at the meeting where one councilman will literally read off from a handwritten list and say, well, I want to move that we do X, Y, Z. So I have literally seconds to decide. And my response to that is to vote no. Maybe it's a good idea, but we're going to come back and vote on it next meeting after we've had a significant amount of time to think about it. If you bring it up to my desk moments before I vote on it, I'm not going to vote yes. I'm going to vote no. And you can protest and say it's a great idea and we need it. Well, it's a great idea today. It'll be a great idea 2 weeks from now at the next meeting.
Well, since you're in council, John, what do you think about the 3-reading rule?
I think the 3-reading rule is an ancient protection and right of the people that needs to be enforced. Let me tell you something. A lot of people believe, including the Canadian Parliament, which has a version of the 3-reading rule, that it has its sources in Great Britain, 15th and 16th century. But if you look further back, you'll find that the 3-reading rule, which requires a legislative body to read or consider a piece of legislation 3 times prior to a vote, usually at 3 separate meetings, actually started in some form in ancient Greece. The city of Athens in 403 BC passed a 2-reading rule where you had to read each piece of legislation, then post it to the marketplace, the public square, if you will, and then read it a second time before you could vote on it. And this is a great story, Rob. The reason they passed their version of the 3-reading rule is because during the Peloponnesian War against the Spartans, there was a big naval battle, and a lot of the Athenian ships were sunk. And the generals had to make a decision. Do we stick around and try and save the drowning sailors in the sinking ships, or do we beeline back to Athens to essentially defend the ports? And the generals decided, we've got to go back to the ports. It's terrible. We're going to lose a lot of men, but we have to defend the city of Athens. So the generals, rightly or wrongly, sail back to Athens and leave a significant amount of their troops to die. And when they get back, the parents of the abandoned sailors, who are all drowning or drowned at this point, are outraged. They go to their city council, the Assembly of Athens, and they demand that the generals be executed. Now, Socrates himself said this is insane. We cannot kill our generals. And by the way, many historians believe the reason why Socrates was ultimately executed, forced to drink hemlock, was because of the fact he not only spoke out against executing the generals, but because he was assigned to arrest one of the generals for execution and he refused to do it. Well, over Socrates' objection, the Athenian assembly voted to execute most of their generals. And surprise, surprise, with all their military leaders dead, no one knew what they were doing, and they abruptly lost the war to Sparta. Well, needless to say, at the next city council meeting, they decided this went terribly, and they passed their version of the 3-reading rule, a 2-reading rule, so that they would no longer make hasty decisions, and they would give the full public, like, say, Socrates, an opportunity to participate in the process and voice their objections, so that they wouldn't make a heated decision. They wouldn't vote on something before everyone read it, if you will. So all the way back to ancient Athens, we have something of the 3-reading rule, and today most municipalities in Ohio, the Ohio State Legislature, U.S. Congress, the Canadian Parliament, all these different common law legislative bodies have a version of the 3-reading rule. The problem is, don't enforce it. We simply waive the rule in most cases, particularly in Ohio. We waive it constantly. In fact, the Plain Dealer did a study that showed that many suburbs of Cleveland waive the 3-reading rule over 90% of the time, or about 90% of the time. And that's just outrageous. There's a reason this rule has lasted for thousands of years, and it's because hasty legislation, without the legislators considering it carefully, without input from the public and from citizens, residents, neighbors, is bad legislation. Process and procedure matters, and I am a big supporter of the 3-reading rule. We need to enforce it, Rob.
Well, John, yeah, I love what you just said. And for anybody out there listening, when your city council declares an emergency, you need to bring up what John Pleshnik just said. I applaud you for that, John. That was great.
But you know what, Rob? I want to add one more thing. Don't bring up what John Plechnik said, because this debate was had centuries ago. Bring up what Jeremy Bentham said in his book Political Tactics, written hundreds of years ago. Philosopher and social reformer Jeremy Bentham, one of the first that believed in equality for women, just among many of his accomplishments, said, when somebody wants to waive the rule, he said, people will remember those waivers, and I'm quoting, with dread. Because more often than not, Rob, as Jeremy Bentham says, they're not waiving the rule because it's a true emergency. And when he gives an example of a true emergency, Jeremy Bentham says the mutiny at the Nore, where sailors literally mutinied and blockaded London during wartime. That's an emergency. When your military and your sailors are mutineering, that's an emergency where you might waive the rule. But most of the time, Jeremy Bentham says, you're waiving the rule to stifle debate and discussion. And you might ask yourself, why would your city council want to stifle debate? Well, sometimes it's because they're lazy, Rob. It's because they don't want to read pieces or consider pieces of legislation 3 times and do the work. Other times there's a more sinister reason. Sometimes they want to pass something controversial without the public knowing about it. And in Willoughby Hills on October 10th, we waived the 3-reading rule. I wasn't on council at the time, although I was at the meeting and I was outraged. We waived the 3-reading rule to pass a sewer fee increase. And I believe, based on the conversation of the councilmen, the reason they waived that rule is they didn't want the public to have time to object. One councilman voted against waiver, and that was Councilman Dave Fiebig, and he said that the people have a right to know that we're considering raising their sewer fees, and they have a right to object. And Councilman Ray Samich replied something to this effect, let them complain after the fact. They didn't want people to have a chance to object. And I'll just say one more thing, Rob. Sometimes it's more sinister still. Earlier this year, we were debating whether or not we should read our road and sewer projects 3 times. And one councilman named Frank Germano objected and objected and objected. And he said, we need to pass it immediately. We need to make this an emergency. And he told us that he'd spoken with our service director, Nate Catania, or I should say our street superintendent, Nate Catania, and he told him there would be a sinkhole on Somme Center Road, which many of your listeners know is one of the big roads on the east side of Cleveland. It's like people could be hurt. We need to immediately pass these bills because this is a safety issue. Well, after the meeting, and we didn't waive the 3-reading rule, by the way, on most legislation, after the meeting, 2 councilmen spoke with the street superintendent and learned that he had never even talked to Councilman Germano. He'd made the whole thing up. Not only did Superintendent Catania not say there'd be a sinkhole on Somme Center Road, he never even talked to the councilman. You might ask yourself, why was Frank Germano so nervous? Why would he lie to try and pass this legislation faster, particularly when we learned that the city couldn't even begin work on these projects until there was a thaw? Because back then, this was early in the year when it was still snowing and 0-degree temperatures, none of this work could be done anyway. Well, if we couldn't even do the work, why was it an emergency? Why did Councilman Germano want to waive this 3-reading rule so badly? Well, it wouldn't have sped up getting the projects done, but once the money's appropriated, we can immediately pay the contractors. And it turns out that Councilman Germano had been voting on appropriations that were ultimately paid to a company named Landco for years, and it turns out that that company is owned 100% by his parents, and that he's worked for it in the past, may still work for it now, and he's worked on projects in Willoughby Hills. I personally think that's completely and utterly wrong, but we now know why Councilman Germano, in my mind, was so desperate to waive the rule. He didn't want anyone to look at the projects and realize that they were going to his family-owned company. He just wanted to be passed, and he wanted to be paid. So when people tell you waive the 3-reading rule, remember the words Jeremy Bentham, not John Plechnik, but philosopher Jeremy Bentham said, you'll remember those cries of urgency with, I quote, dread.
All right, John. Well, Dave, I want to pose the same question to you.
Yeah,
you got
I will never vote yes for any bill that I have not read thoroughly, just as I would never sign a contract regarding my house or my life without reading it thoroughly.
All right. Mike, you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I can tell you it looks really bad to where you have a councilman that is using the system to make his family profit. That's very bad. I mean, that's cronyism at its worst, openly. I don't know why the people in Willoughby Hills haven't rioted yet. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And may I interject one thing, Rob? May I interject one thing? When you say the word ridiculous, I'm not sure it goes far enough, Mike, because many people ask me, John Plechnik, why don't you go to your law director? And my response, sadly, was because our law director just got back from a Bahamas cruise with our mayor and the guy that I beat. My opponent, the mayor, and our law director went on a cruise together. And the last project where Councilman Germano's company was being paid $1,500 a day, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, Councilman Frank Germano, high school dropout, his company was being paid $1,500 a day to do, road and sewer project digging work. This last project, where he was paid, and I want to say again, $1,500 a day, took place in our law director's backyard. He was literally digging up our law director, Tom Loeby's backyard, working on pipes or what have you, and Tom Loeby claims he didn't know that Frank Germano was associated with Landco and doing work for the city. I don't know about you, but when someone comes with a shovel in my backyard or a backhoe, I notice. And if that person is my boss, I'm like, hey, boss, hey, Councilman Germano, why are you digging up my backyard? Why are you digging up my backyard, Councilman Germano? I think I would notice that, which is why I don't find it credible when our law director says he doesn't. And one more thing. Others say, well, John Plechnik, why didn't you go to your city prosecutor? Why did you have to talk to the FBI, which is investigating Willoughby Hills now? Why do you have to talk to other state agencies? Why didn't you go to your local city prosecutor? Well, I would have, except our local city prosecutor is none other than Mike Germano, Councilman Frank Germano's brother. And something told me that Councilman Germano's brother, who's breaking our charter, in my view, because our charter explicitly says you cannot have an officer, a councilman, and an employee, a prosecutor in the same immediate family. Given that prosecutor Mike Germano is breaking the charter already, why would he care about his brother breaking the charter?
Wow. John, you have to realize.
Ridiculous cuts it.
John, you have to realize something. When I say ridiculous, I have to keep my my comments clean and professional. I'll tell you what I really think when I see you face to face on the side. So.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But gentlemen, I appreciate you being on. And ladies and gentlemen, you learn more in the last 15 minutes of this show than you can on any other mainstream media outlet. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank John Plechnik, Dave Macko, and my co-host Mike for being on the show tonight. As always, God bless you all, and God bless America.